Andrej, thank you for this interview. So, what is Faith and Order? What does its name refer to? And are you able to share with us more about its history?
Faith and Order is the commission of the World Council of Churches that conducts, promotes, and seeks theological dialogue and assists the churches that are engaged in that theological dialogue on a multilateral level, and addresses specifically those issues that either unite the churches or disunite the churches. Because the main purpose of the Commission is to assist the churches as they grow and journey towards the visible unity together. Now, the name Faith in Order refers to two core aspects of the work of the Commission. Faith encompassing theological beliefs and doctrines, while order refers to the church structure, church practices, and church governance. Going back to history, the very beginnings of the ecumenical movement at the beginning of the 20th century, the initiative to establish a sort of a commission, which Faith and Order has become throughout the history, has started back in 1910 at the missionary conference held in Edinburgh. After the conference, there was an initiative to discuss particularly matters of faith and order, and to convey a global gathering of Christians to discuss these issues and their theological relevance. Now, the initiative was developed in the next couple of years, or rather almost decade and a half and even more, and we have the first World Conference of Faith and Order taking place in Lausanne in 1927. So this is the moment when Faith and Order has officially so to say, started its work. And after this major global event, it continued to operate as a global body and as a movement, so to say, which held another World Conference 10 years later. But as the WCC, World Council of Churches, was established after the Second World War in 1948, the movement has merged and became a part of the WCC together with its, so to say, counterpart, Life and Work movement, and thereby became one of the commissions of the World Council of Churches. So starting from 1948, Faith and Order now operates as a commission. And what it does, it engages, as I said, in theological studies. It studies various different theological problems and doctrinal issues and so on that unite or divide and separate the churches, either within the church families or in between the different church families, and does so by producing study documents, hopefully reaching a consensus and common understanding between the churches on certain issues, and producing what are called the convergence documents. Also accompanying the churches as they do their bilateral dialogues as well, providing resources for theological education, also helping in producing the prayer material for Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, and so on. So for the last 80 years almost, the Commission has been doing so and has been growing and enabling the fellowship of the World Council of Churches to grow further in unity.
And we are in 2023. WCC appoints you as the new director of the Faith and Order Commission. Could you tell us more about yourself and your story, your feelings, the moment you learned that you are appointed as the new director of Faith and Order?
Right. Well, I remember being really excited, being really grateful and humbled. Going back to my student days as a student of theology, which was around 20 years ago, I would read Father George Florovsky's biography, and I remember reading how he took part in the movement, Faith and Order movement, and one of the initial world conferences. And this very phrase stuck in my mind, and I can't kept coming back to it. So now, after so many years, after 2 decades basically, and after the experience that I gained in the meantime, becoming a part of this history and this rich legacy of faith and order is just a humbling and gracious experience that one can only hope for to be able to have it in his lifetime. So going back about my personal history, well, I was born and raised in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I started my studies of theology at the University of Belgrade in Serbia. Finished my studies there. I started working as a teaching assistant, and then once I finished my PhD as an assistant professor at the Faculty of Orthodox Theology of the University of Belgrade. I also worked as a research fellow at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory at the same university. In terms of my ecumenical engagements, since I was a student, I took part in various meetings, conferences, usually gathering younger people from either different Christian confessions and church traditions, or rather interreligious, in their interreligious settings as well. So, but initially, when I really when the doors of the ecumenical world really opened up to me, was the 2013 Busan Assembly of the World Council of Churches. This is where my big ecumenical journey, so to say, started. And since then, I was a member of the Central Committee of the World Council of Churches. Also worked on preparing the next assembly in Karlsruhe as a member of the Assembly Planning Committee. And in the meantime, also engaged to some extent as a theological advisor with the Churches Commission for Migrants in Europe. And finally, in Karlsruhe, at the Karlsruhe Assembly, I was taking part as a facilitator at the GERI program, Global Ecumenical Theological Institute. After that, the whole procedure of nominating, selecting, and appointing the Director of Faith and Order Commission took place. And by the end of the 2022, I ended up with this incredible news.
And it is already 3 months now that you have been serving in your positions. What are your first impressions about the work in the organization, about the ecumenical movement in general, from, I would say, an insider's position as staff?
Right. Well, serving on the Central Committee, which is basically, besides the Assembly, the main governing body of the World Council of Churches, that gave me a great opportunity to learn about the work and to understand the organization from within, so to say. But once I came in this position and took office, so to say, a lot of it changed. I mean, the perspective shifted in a completely other way. I knew a lot about the work of the World Council of Churches, but I never realized actually the scope of that work, and many different program areas, many different projects, many different conversations that the World Council of Churches has been facilitating and working on in the last years. So getting into the office now enabled me to understand this vast scope of the work of the WCC. And it also enabled me to understand that behind all of this work, there are particular persons in charge of it and who are doing the work. And I think that is the most valuable experience that I got in the last 3 months, that I got to know people who are extremely talented, extremely gifted, extremely creative, and very engaged, committed to the work of the World Council of Churches. And I would say that it is thanks to them that the World Council of Churches still plays a major role in the ecumenical world. And I would say also that it is thanks to them and the colleagues from the Secretariat that we might say many people are talking about the ecumenical winter, or used to talk about it, and now they're talking about the ecumenical spring. And being in Geneva for the last 3 months, I realized how challenging spring in Geneva can be. since the weather keeps changing constantly, and as soon as you hope for a nice weather and clear sky, you end up with stormy clouds and pouring rain and so on. And it seems to me that although those similar things take place in the ecumenical spring that is happening, there is hope and there is witness that the spring is there and that summer is about to come as well.
Andrej, what is the procedure in the fellowship, but also in the WCC governing bodies, for the appointment of new WCC commission, for the new commissioners that will be designated shortly?
So Faith and Order Commission consists of between 40 and 60 commissioners. All member churches are invited to nominate persons to serve on the commission. The persons who are nominated are supposed to be educated and well-trained and formed theologians that have preferably a PhD degree in theology, but at least a master's degree in theology, because in this way we ensure the competence that is required and necessary for the work of the commission. Now, once the churches nominate the names, Faith and Order Commission appoints a nominations committee that looks and researches all these names with the help of the Faith and Order Secretariat, of course, because it's a huge amount of data about a vast number of people that you have to take care of. Researching these names, the nominations committee selects a list of names which is proposed to the Central Committee. The Central Committee finally takes the decision, and hopefully it will take one now in June, which is in 1 month's time, and finally appoint persons to serve on the commission. The commission should be balanced. It should provide equal representation of world regions. It should provide equal representation of different confessions and church traditions. It should be balanced in terms of gender representation, representation of youth, indigenous people, people with disabilities. But also the commission includes those representatives of the churches who are not member churches of the World Council of Churches. So, for example, it includes also representatives of Roman Catholic Church, but also of certain Pentecostal churches who are not members of the WCC.
The outgoing Faith and Order Commission, with a long service of 8 years, has produced very rich theological work. Could you share with us more information about the milestones of this work, as the new commissioners will be appointed in a few weeks' time?
So the present or the outgoing commission has conducted its work in 3 main areas. One being the theological explorations of pilgrimage of justice and peace. Back in Busan at the assembly, pilgrimage of justice and peace was set as an overarching paradigm for the whole work of the council. And now the aim of the commission was to engage with this paradigm and in a quite innovative and creative way explore theological implications of all 3 key concepts of this paradigm, meaning pilgrimage, justice, and peace. And this is something that hasn't been usually done in the Faith and Order Commission history, and it actually was a kind of a new approach in dealing with faith and order matters. And it gained very much, it was rather well accepted and received in the council and in the fellowship. And I think it opened up doors for exploring further new methodologies and ways of doing our work. Now, secondly, the core, or rather largest scope of work, was done in the field or area of ecclesiology, meaning the teaching and understanding of what church is, what its nature, what its structure, what are their ministries, purpose, and so on. And this area of work is going back basically 40 years in history of Faith and Order. I might come back to that later on. But throughout this work, Commission has engaged with churches and their official responses to the second historical convergence document in the history of faith and order, the document The Church Towards a Common Vision, which was prepared and published and disseminated to churches before the Busan Assembly. And the churches were invited to offer their responses. So the Commission was receiving and collecting the responses, but also analyzing them, reflecting on them, identifying key themes in those responses that can fuel its future work, but also quite quickly realizing that there is a significant lack of responses and engagement with the churches from Global South, and especially with the so-called new and emerging churches and the new forms of being the church. So the Commission took it upon itself to engage with these churches through meetings, but also analyzing the bilateral dialogues of these churches and so on, and to further broaden the table of ecclesiological discussions. And this was a core, I would say, accomplishment of this commission. And this has also, in a great way, took the commission out of its comfort zone, relying usually on regions and those church traditions who are quite familiar with the work of faith and order, and for whom the ecclesiological explorations bear much more relevance. Now, the Commission went out of its boundaries, so to say, to engage with these new and emerging churches, and especially with the Global South. And thirdly, Commission worked in the area of moral discernment, also continuing the work of the Commission back from early 2000s, exploring the ways, not necessarily trying to reach the agreement between representatives of different churches on certain ethical issues, but trying to understand how does the moral discernment process take place within specific churches, within specific Christian traditions, and to thereby understand how can we have a fruitful, engaging, and a dialogue that can actually build our fellowship and not jeopardize it and not cause further divisions, as is usually the case when the ethical issues are discussed in this context.
In which ways can the churches benefit from the results of the work of the Faith and Order Commission? Can you share with us historical paradigms that showcase the impact of the Faith and Order work to the fellowship in general, at a theological level always?
Right. Well, first of all, I would say, as the churches themselves are striving for increasing and reaching or growing in visible unity with one another, they can use the work of Faith and Order, first of all, to understand how do their core beliefs differ between different church traditions, what are the commonalities, what are the points of convergence, what are the contact points that can actually enable us to grow in this unity. And thereby the work of Faith and Order actually fuels this dialogue and accompanies the churches as they strive for this unity. Secondly, I think it provides a rather crucial theological resource for reflection that takes place in the churches themselves. It enables also the churches to understand their own traditions in a better way, because we understand our own identity better when we engage with others, and when we are in communion, and when we strive to build a fellowship with others. And I think it goes the same with the churches and their own theological self-understanding. Thirdly, I would say that also it provides a rather crucial resource material for theological education within the churches, but also the universities, academic institutions, and so on, that enables also the students of theology and people who are formed in going through the theological formation to understand core theological issues and debates and reflections that have been taking place throughout the history but are taking place today as well. And finally, I would say that by bringing churches together and enabling them to reach a common understanding about their core beliefs, I think that the core beliefs actually fuel and always inform and rather push us into action. This also work enables churches. This work enables churches to, once they realize how much actually they share together in terms of their common belief and the faith that they share, despite their differences, engage in further action and offer common witness to the world.
Andrej, is a student with a research focus on faith and order able to reach you or any of the WCC Faith and Order staff directly? And if yes, how can that happen?
Yes, that's easily possible. The only thing that one needs to do is to Google Faith and Order Commission, and you would probably end up as with the first result directing you to the web page of Faith and Order, which is placed at the web page of the World Council of Churches. And anybody interested can find the contact of all persons working for the Faith and Order Commission, all of my colleagues included there. And I would invite anybody interested, especially younger scholars and students who want to learn more, who need perhaps a suggestion and advice and information on the resources that they need, to contact us and reach us whenever they feel that needed.
Why is the Faith and Order work on unity relevant in 2023, and especially in the current context of international world affairs?
I would say the world as we witness it today has many features that make people rather dissatisfied with it. First of all, we can witness that despite globalization that takes place, and that despite the fact that the whole world is being in a way united through either technology, means of communication and so on, there's a lot of fragmentation and polarization taking place. In some instances, especially due to those technologies and communication means that we use. Because instead of uniting us, they keep separating us, and they often cause rather strong opinions that lead to further polarizations. And this happens not only between different societies and world regions or countries, but also this happens within the countries, within the same society, and within families, actually. So I would say that in that context, working on what unites us provides a sort of a counter-narrative to the present narrative of constant and further deepening the polarization and fragmentation of the world. And this is what I think that why the Faith and Order work is rather crucial. The other thing is that there are various contemporary challenges that we face in the world, such as violence, climate change, and so on. And I believe that those challenges require our, especially churches' reaction, rather strong reaction. And churches do react often strongly, and they often do that, acting together. But I believe that it's quite important that the churches actually share the same system of beliefs and same system of values, and that this is actually where their common action comes from. This is the source that gives the impulse to their wish to act upon certain issues. So therefore, addressing these core beliefs, core values that churches share or don't share, that unite them or disunite them, is what can help churches further not only grow towards ecclesial unity, but also act together in addressing these pressing and rather harsh challenges that today's world is facing. And finally, I believe that quite essentially the faith and order work is always being around unity, that this is something what World Council of Churches is essentially about. This is going back to its history, to its roots. This is the essential idea and mission of the World Council of Churches. So thereby, by bringing churches together and by enabling them to reach a consensus and common ground, it also helps them to grow in unity and offer actually the witness to the world that is much needed at the present time.
And Andrej, from the director's position, what is your vision for Faith and Order in the years to come?
So I would say a couple of key things. First, that we should probably try to be even better and even bold with developing new methodologies and developing new forms of communicating our work with the fellowship, but also with the world itself. There have been many things that in the recent past that have improved the work of the Commission in those terms, but I think that there is much more to be done in the future. So I would say, for example, first of all, enhancing the reception of the work of the Faith and Order is rather a crucial thing. The work is as relevant as it is received within the churches and by the churches. So thereby engaging further with the churches and enabling the reception of its work, communicating in a better way, in a more creative way, in a more innovative way, is something that we should definitely strive for. Then again, I believe that we need to probably be bold as we are and as we were in the recent past. But there are many issues that are rather divisive and that are causing further polarizations. And it is the mission actually of Faith and Order to address the issues that cause the divisions and that separate the churches. So I believe we need to always focusing on unity and bringing churches together and facilitating the dialogue that will bring and build the fellowship. I believe that we need to be brave in how we do that dialogue and that how we face each other, how we speak to each other, and so on. And finally, as we approach the 6th World Conference of Faith and Order that is taking place in 2025, marking the 1700th anniversary of the First Ecumenical Council, I think this brings us incredible opportunity to be together, to celebrate the unity that we have, to address the disunity that we still have, the differences that we have, to offer common witness, but also to set a milestone and open up the new era of the work of the Faith and Order Commission. The World Conferences have historically always, in a way, completed one era and one chapter of the history of the Faith and Order and opened up entirely a new one. So I hope and I'm excited to see what this new chapter will be, and will be rather happy and rather excited to be part of it.
Thank you very much for this discussion.